Hello and welcome to the Statesman Talk. I'm Ananya Gupta. On this episode, we are joined by Congress MP Manish Tewari, former Union Minister, three-time Member of Parliament, and he currently represents the Chandigarh constituency in Lok Sabha. Manish Tewari, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
There's so much controversy of late over the electoral poll revision in Bihar. Why do you think linking Aadhaar to voter ID is different from using it as ID proof?
Well, there is a fundamental distinction between the two. First of all, one needs to understand that the Aadhaar program was essentially rolled out to ensure that internal migrants who did not have any proof of identity were given a number. It's actually a number, it's not really a card.
Yeah.
But, were given a number which then they could use as proof of identity to get their ration cards, to get their driving license, to get their other documents which are essential in order to get on with life. And so therefore that was the underlying substratum of Aadhaar. Now, over a period of time, as the Aadhaar program rolled out and it was then undergirded by an act of parliament, it became the de facto proof of identity. But the distinction is that Aadhaar is for every resident, while you can only vote if you're a citizen.
Yes.
So therefore, there is a qualitative distinction between the two. Having said that, therefore, when you link Aadhaar to the electoral paradigm, it is like comparing apples and pears. So something which is made for every resident so that he can have some modicum of identity proof, so that he can get those documents which are required to get on with life, to something which requires you to be a citizen in order to vote. So you are essentially trying to match apples and pears, which doesn't happen. Having said that, given the fact that Aadhaar captures your biometrics, and it's another debate whether government should be in possession of everybody's biometrics or not. Like for example, in Estonia, you are in possession of your biometrics on a card, and therefore the option is on you when you present the card. But be that as it may, since the biometrics are existing, it can be used as proof of identity. And so therefore, what is happening in Bihar, for the lack of a better word, is completely ridiculous. For example, you are trying to de novo do an exercise, when there's no need to de novo do an exercise. For example, those who are already on the voters list, if they're residing there, obviously they have been verified when you got them on the voters list. Asking them to submit documents de novo is absolutely bizarre. Yes, the new voters who are being enrolled, you can obviously ask them, for proof of identity. And that's why the Supreme Court very rightly suggested that a driving license, an Aadhaar card, and, other such instruments should be used as a proof of identity. Because for people to dig up their birth certificates, people are born at home, people are born in villages, there won't be a birth certificate. At best, there would be a school leaving certificate if you've done your 10 plus 2 now. In fact, you don't even get it at the 10th level now. So you're just making it harder for people to vote. And to compound the ridiculousness, the Election Commission has now decided to extend this all across the country. So the obvious inference is that this is an attempt to disenfranchise people.
It's an attempt to steal votes, as the Congress has been saying.
Well, not really steal votes, to disenfranchise people.
Okay.
Basically, essentially try and, for some ulterior motive, get people off the voting rolls. And that is insidious. Nobody is saying that somebody who's not a citizen of India should be allowed to vote. But to penalize 100 crore odd people, primarily because you think by some stretch of McCarthyism that everybody is a fifth columnist in the country, is absolutely being a subscriber of conspiracy theories, for lack of a better word.
There are reports now that the Election Commission has written to its officials in other states as well to carry out a similar electoral roll revision exercise in other states. Do you think that's significant given that some key states are going to polls next year, including West Bengal?
As I said, it's the motive, the ulterior motive seems to be very clear. It is meant at disenfranchising a certain section of the populace. And therefore, that is completely and absolutely against the constitutional grain. Remember, you don't have a fundamental right to vote. You don't even have a fundamental right to get elected. You have a constitutional right to vote. You have a constitutional right to get elected. I think, if I remember from the top of my head, it is Article 327 of the Constitution, or 328, one of them. And so, under those circumstances, you are essentially, by this exercise, trying to take away constitutional rights from the people.
Will electoral roll revision be one of the key issues that you raise in Parliament in the monsoon session?
Obviously, that's a sequitur. So an exercise which seeks to disenfranchise people. If that is not articulated in Parliament, then where else will it be articulated?
Your party has repeatedly asked for a special session of Parliament on Pahalgam. That didn't happen. But you did join the delegations that were sent across the world to take India's message against terror. What was that experience like?
Well, you see, you need to make a distinction between two things. Number one, what were those delegations all about? Those delegations were about exposing Pakistan's perfidy, now going back 45 years. If you have the time, the entire strategy to bleed India with 1,000 cuts actually goes back to the liberation of Bangladesh and the surrender of 91,000 West Pakistani soldiers and officers to the Indian Army. That is an indelible scar on the collective psyche of the Pakistani military establishment, which they have not been able to surmount since 1971. Now going back, 50 years or so. So it was on the 24th of January 1972 when Bhutto, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who had taken over from Field Marshal Yahya Khan, convened a meeting in Multan. It's called the Multan Conference, where two decisions were taken. One, to bleed India with 1,000 cuts, and number two, Pakistan will acquire nuclear weapons at any cost, which colloquially they said, even if we have to eat grass. In fact, there's a great book called Eating Grass on Pakistan's nuclear program. And they essentially took a leaf out of India's book. Like we had trained the Mukti Bani for asymmetric warfare. And so therefore, they were present even much before the formal hostilities began in the December of 1971. This is really what the Pakistanis started doing qua India. In 1980, Punjab became the first frontier, got upscaled to Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. In the 1990s, by 2000, it spread all over India. Parliament attack, the Mumbai bombings, then the Mumbai terror attack of 26/11, and so on and so forth, Uri and then Balakot. So there are a number of milestones. So therefore, the objective of the outreach was to actually tell the story of Pakistan's perfidy and why it is essential to create a global consensus against those states which use terror as an instrument of state policy. Insofar as the kinetic actions that we undertook between the 7th of May and the 10th of May are concerned, you see, obviously in any democracy there will be an examination of those actions. First of all, is there space for conventional war under a nuclear overhang? Number two, if there is space for a conventional kinetic action under a nuclear overhang, how do you calibrate it? How would the escalation dynamics really work? Given the fact that there are no off-ramps, no institutional off-ramps between India and Pakistan, both of which are nuclear weapon states. Number four, how efficacious is conventional or how efficacious are conventional responses against asymmetric warfare? Would it really ensure that there is the next terror attack does not take place? Number five, if it is not a guarantee, which it certainly isn't, that the next terror attack will not take place, because given how Pakistan's deep state is constructed, then are you just mowing the grass periodically to create a deterrent?
Yes.
So these are very serious issues which require a discussion in Parliament. Unfortunately, our legislative institutions have become a he said, she said, and the space for serious structured debate on either side, gets lost in rhetoric and grandstanding. So, therefore, the issues that I listed out, including as to why General Asim Munir gave that speech on 15th of April 2025, dragging that wretched two nations theory, which was discredited by the creation of Bangladesh, out of the closet.
The jugular vein comment to me.
That Hindus and Muslims are two separate nations. Now, that essentially was the dog whistle which led to the 22nd April 2025 attack in Pahalgam, where people were identified on the basis of faith, singled out and executed. Now, what is the government's read? What was the intention of the Pakistani deep state behind doing that, considering that a ceasefire had been holding on the LOC and the international border since the February of 2021? So these are very, very profound questions which have implications for India's national security. Parliament is the forum to discuss them. Where else would they be discussed? But unfortunately, we've not had a serious national security debate in this country. Now going back many decades, and this is the same country which in 1962, while the border war with Pakistan was on, was concurrently discussing the happenings on the border in Parliament between the 7th to the 16th of November 1962. During 65, the Monsoon war, Prime Minister Shastri and his ministers were regularly keeping Parliament briefed. In 1971, when the war for the liberation of Bangladesh was going on, the winter session of Parliament, the Parliament was in session for its winter session, and therefore Parliament was being taken into confidence. It didn't happen in 1999. Ironically, despite the fact Lok Sabha was dissolved and Rajya Sabha was in session, and you had Mr. Vajpayee as Prime Minister, the person who had actually called for the 1962 Parliament session. So he didn't think it appropriate to really take Parliament into confidence when, as Prime Minister, he had the chance to do it. But as I was pointing out, even during the First World War, the Second World War, the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, or even when America was dragged into the First War in 1917 and the Second War in 1941, their respective houses of legislature, the U.S. Congress, was kept in the loop. And in fact, in the U.S. System, there is a very strong parliamentary oversight over defense, foreign affairs, intelligence. You have select committees which are briefed in camera. So therefore, ultimately, you can't treat national security as a holy cow and say, oh, this is not up for discussion. In a parliamentary democracy, which is based on constitutionalism, the ultimate oversight of government's actions lies with Parliament, and to deny Parliament that opportunity is actually subverting national security in a sense.
What was the response you got from the countries you visited? I believe Qatar was one of them.
So we went to Qatar, we went to South Africa, we went to Ethiopia and to Egypt. So we told our story, and the response was obviously varied because every country has its own take on the situation. But by and large, there was no sympathy for Pakistan. There was no support for state-sponsored terror. Ethiopia, which has been dealing with this question because of its proximity to Somalia, the Al-Shabaab is a constant pain in their side. They and the African Union, in fact, the African Union is the first transnational grouping which has a convention against terrorism. So the response was positive, was obviously measured and calibrated as all diplomatic responses were. But the important thing is, I think for the first time in a holistic manner, we were able to tell the story of Pakistan's perfidy to the world.
The fight against terrorism must be something that's deeply personal for you. Your father was assassinated by terrorists in 1984.
Well, it is personal. I mean, it's the reason why I am in public life. I mean, if it wouldn't have been for that unfortunate day on the 3rd of April 1984, I possibly may have been a corporate executive somewhere. So, yes, the fight against terror is deeply personal, and I have fought the ideological battle against extremism, against fundamentalism, against separatism, against terrorism. As a young General Secretary of the National Students' Union of India in Punjab between 1985 and 1995, when it wasn't certain that if you go out in the morning, you'll come back in the evening. So, yes, we've grown up on the trench lines of this fight against terror. We've seen Pakistan's perfidy firsthand. And after 1995, when we had a law and order solution to the problem of terror in Punjab, we've seen as to how Pakistan has been trying to subvert an entire generation or entire 2 generations with the export of narcotics into Punjab.
Yes.
So therefore, this whole thing is very up close. And often I feel that if the map of India was inverted, which is that the south was on top and the north was at the bottom, the people in the south would be better able to understand the geopolitical realities which belabor the north, and the people in the north would not suffer from sea blindness, because India's real potential actually lies in the maritime domain.
What did Prime Minister Modi tell you when you met him after coming back from your missions? Did you get a chance to give him that feedback as to what worked and what didn't?
Yes, obviously, that was the whole purpose of that exercise. So it was done in 2 parts. So there was a conversation with Minister Jaishankar, right, because he wanted to try and understand what our impressions were, because things were, as he said, when things are fresh in your mind, you are able to better recollect what happened. And then, of course, the Prime Minister was very receptive, and people shared their experiences. They shared what the responses of different countries were. And Prime Minister listened attentively and reacted where he thought was appropriate. So, yeah, it was a fairly free-flowing, informal, unstructured conversation.
What's your take on the interim report that's been taken out by the investigators now on the Air India 171 crash in Ahmedabad?
The implied insinuation, irrespective of what the civil aviation minister may say, is that it's a pilot's error. And it's the easiest to pin it on a dead man, because dead men tell no tales. I don't think any experienced pilot would have been so stupid, for the lack of another word, to deliberately, shut off the fuel to the engines. And obviously, there are huge corporate interests at play, right? Because there is a huge amount of money which rides on these interests. Because if it is found that there was actually a structural problem, or there were mechanical or other issues with the plane, obviously it's going to impact the sale of Boeing worldwide. So you've seen right from day one that a concerted attempt has been made to pin it on the pilots, to try and defame them. There are all kinds of nasty stories about one pilot which are being circulated, which obviously is being done for ulterior motives. And therefore, it is very essential that the truth must come out. It should not be buried under the carpet by pinning the blame erroneously on 2 dead people who are unable to defend themselves.
Yes. Do you also find it peculiar that the report was released in the middle of the night, India time, and that many are saying gave the advantage to certain vested narratives to spin a story really against the pilots specifically?
Well, in the sense, I have not really looked at the timing, but one thing is very evident. If you rewind back almost to the afternoon when this crash took place, there has been this concerted attempt, which has been par for the course in almost every air crash which has taken place, that blame it on the pilots because they will not be able to defend themselves. And this seems to be following the same pattern. And it will be unfortunate if the truth is again buried by, as I said, blaming it on two dead people who are unable to defend themselves.
In the end, we want to talk about your constituency, Chandigarh. You've recently written about the unique challenge of administering Chandigarh, capital of both Punjab and Haryana. Can you explain the challenges that you see and the administrative reforms that you would call for?
So, well, essentially, this question falls in two different buckets. The first bucket is that Chandigarh was built as the capital of joint Punjab in lieu of Lahore, which we lost to Pakistan in 1947, because the partition of India was not really the partition of India. It was the partition of two provinces of India, Punjab and Bengal, right? Punjab ended up suffering a little more because Mahatma Gandhi decided to go to Bengal and become almost a single person civil defense institution, if I may describe him in that manner. But Punjab suffered immensely. 2 million people died between the July and the September of 1947, right? And another 20 million people became homeless. So from Delhi to Peshawar, there was rape, loot, pillage, plunder, and in those circumstances, the country got partitioned. And so Chandigarh was set up as the joint capital. Then Punjab got partitioned again or trifurcated in 1966. They couldn't decide on the status of Chandigarh, so they made it a union territory under the Punjab Reorganization Act. And for the first 20 years after 76, there was an attempt to settle the political question of Chandigarh. But since 86, for the last 40 years, everybody's given up and sort of reconciled to the status quo that this will be a union territory and it will be the capital of both Punjab and Haryana. But in the process, what has happened is that an interim administrative arrangement, which was supposed to be there for 3, 4, 5 years, has got perpetuated into perpetuity. And that administrative arrangement does not really cater to the aspirations of the people of that city. Right? Okay. It's too bureaucratic. It is too overstaffed at the top. There's
a lot of babudom, you say.
That's right. There's a paralysis of decision making, if I can put it in those words. So therefore, if Chandigarh has to stay the way it is because of the convoluted political claims of both Punjab and Haryana, and of course the aspirations of the people of Chandigarh who wanted to stay as a union territory, then its administrative structure has to be reimagined. So that is insofar as Chandigarh is concerned. Insofar as the rest of the country is concerned, in fact, in the February of 2020, I had written a piece in the Hindustan Times about the need for administrative and governance reforms and how Parliament should constitute a permanent standing committee in order to deal with this most critical question. Because on the ground, whenever there is an interface between the citizen and the Indian state, it is neither a pleasant experience. Often it is exploitative. Most of the times it is extractive. And if you happen to be living in a disturbed area or where there's the AFSA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, etc., has been promulgated, then maybe the only face of the Indian state you really see is an olive green or khaki, carrying an AK-47. And so therefore, till the time this fundamentally doesn't get re-engineered, that the interface between the citizen and the Indian state does not become a pleasant experience, does not become an experience which eases the way you want to live and work, Till that point in time, India will never be able to punch to its true potential. And unfortunately, despite two administrative commissions, one under the leadership of Mr. Morarji Desai, former Prime Minister of India, the second one under the leadership of Mr. Veerappa Moily, the former Chief Minister of Karnataka and Law Minister of India, they've given voluminous reports, but they've been all effectively shoved under the carpet, by a bureaucracy which does not want any change. It wants status quo to be perpetuated. And the political leadership has also come up short over the decades in trying to get through the status quo. And this needs to be broken. India needs a new administrative and governance paradigm. And that's why I've been repeatedly requesting the Speaker of the Lok Sabha that, like the Estimates Committee of Parliament or the Public Accounts Committee, there should be a permanent committee of Parliament, a permanent standing committee that should look at administrative and governance reforms almost on a daily basis.
Right. I hope this suggestion is taken up. Manish Tewari, thank you so much for joining us here on The Statesman Talk.
Thank you for inviting me.
That's it then on this episode of Statesman Talk. We hope you enjoyed it and we look forward to your comments. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.